let's have a little chat about framing. Not this kind of framing, which you can see in, the frame, which might feel a little bit weird because you're not used to seeing things from this angle, but more about... No, I'm talking about media framing, the way a news outlet frames a news story to present a specific aspect of a reality, or to promote a particular problem definition, or moral evaluation, and how that can actually shape our democratic outcomes. Across media, we see specific framing techniques used to manipulate our perception. While the ideology varies, the toolbox for media manipulation is pretty universal as well. The problem that we've got here, though, is that analysing mainstream media in Aotearoa, well, most of our mainstream media actually leans right to varying degrees. So tricks that left-leaning media are often going to use overseas, like, calling a corporate tax cut a handout, or framing issues around root causes instead of individual agency, or calling a policy cruel, or calling a corrupt right-wing government corrupt, or focusing a story on specific social needs over corporate spin, actually isn't all that common in our mainstream media. And by the power of Grayskull, framing is the power of how media tells us what's important, what to react to, and how to react and interpret what we see. If we look at News Talk, for example, actually, let's look at two stories that came out over the past few days from News Talk. The first one sets up a story about what Kiwis think of employment law changes, but the very first line in the social media post is union-commissioned polling. Now, for the Epstein class owner and lover of conspiracies who claimed that he needed to support racist Julian Batchelor with his defamation case because he shares core beliefs he felt Batchelor was standing up for, Jim Grennan, and the many National Party-linked board and editorial decision-makers at NZME, unions are bad. The way that they share collective power to get better working conditions for their members and seems to frustrate people for some weird reason, who put profit over people. Anyway, News Talk fans are really against unions. In fact, some of them even moved their toy companies to China to avoid them. So framing a story with union-commissioned polling automatically frames it as something to be less confident in for News Talk audiences. But this story about the taxpayer union being upset about spending that's gone missing, well, that's not even given the same framing, because it's both not a union and it is an agency that NZME wants to create authority within audiences. This is what's known as linguistic framing. All right, one of the risks of this really specific form of linguistic framing is the erasure of transparency. Chances are you've come across commentators on social media who've drunk the Kool-Aid from groups like the Free Speech Union or New Zealand Initiative or one of the million other neoliberal think tanks that keep making headlines and, repeating Annie O'Brien's Substacks. But by failing to disclose the origin of the group, they're denying the ability for you, as a voter, to weigh up the credibility of the information you're being presented. You may choose to give no weight at all, for example, to an opinion poll run by the unregulated pollsters hired by National and run by the founder of the TPU, seen here dressed as a child sex offender because he thought it was funny, or you can, if you want to. But you're not made aware of these things and you don't get to decide if that makes sense. It should make sense. Basically, if you're not told, you don't know. If you don't know, that's not fair. One of the other framing tricks that we see a lot from NZME is the use of selective paywalls in content. Take this image taken from the Herald Politics front page on Monday afternoon. I'm sure it must have given Mike Hosking a heart attack to see Labour was literally taking up everything on there. But what we actually have is a couple of really quick headlines that you're not going to notice, a live stream buried in literally the last place the human eye falls on the page. You get to hear a horror story about the scandal of Chris Hipkins using his retirement savings to buy a holiday home that's all legal, above board, fully declared, and not actually hurting anyone. But they rushed the story so much that they actually spelled Hipkins' name wrong in it, and the editors didn't seem to pick it up because, scandalo sells. But that story that's there about the budget, it talks about the fact that National has already taken $1 billion from next year's budget. It was only discovered because of a note buried deep in the reports. It says that tax expert Barbara Edmonds has a really good chance of being the next finance minister. And when asked, Willis says that the money is for something that they're thinking about but haven't decided yet if it should be made public. So she's literally not telling anybody why they took $1 billion from next year's budget and what they're spending it on. And this is paywalled, automatically limiting the number of people who are going to read the story. But on News Talk, they did give the taxpayers union a spot to talk about why this is bad, and no NZME title has talked about the Greens finding higher KiwiSaver costs in this year's budget that came from somewhere, but where isn't exactly being explained by Nicola Willis. This selective discourse creates a misinformed electorate who can't afford to prioritise news subscriptions for whatever reason, and it leads to news outlets to turn important news stories that voters should be aware of into rage bait and a tool for legitimising those AstroTurf groups even further with their audiences. And then there's the issue called mere exposure. Basically, research shows if you keep exposing people to negative framing regarding candidates and parties, you'll end up priming your audience into never seeing anything positive from them at all. Again, a phenomenon that you can clearly see in the wild of comment sections on social media all over the country. And NZME are really good at constantly framing political news negatively for the left, favourably for the right. And RNZ and NZME are both really good at framing news from ACT, almost identical to the way that David Seymour or the ACT Party themselves frame it. And all of these can have some really bad societal outcomes. Research from Harvard shows us that media framing, like we see from NZME products, can heavily influence the way that their readers vote, because it's not just what's reported, but how it's contextualized that shifts people's perception. Paywall use, according to a study from Michigan University last year, influences coverage, leading to a reduction in investigative reporting in favour of soft news, which means financial incentives can directly degrade civic information available to voters. And research on the way that images are used and framed can often help reinforce the story framing biases audiences are developing. Basically, the right picture, no matter how connected it is to the news story, can reinforce audience polarization on an issue, and it discourages you from thinking critically about what you're being presented. So, how can you be a bit more critical in your approach beyond just not paying the Herald and News Talk any attention? Well, listen to your emotions. Right-wing media in particular try and get audiences angry and scared because it's the best driver for clickbait. If you feel your emotions getting all spiky, use that as a warning to proceed with caution. Don't stay on the page you're reading, open a new tab and look for the story elsewhere and see how it's presented. The angle, keywords, fact checks that are used. And this is also going to let you see issues from a wider perspective. Try and mentally strip headlines back as well. Loaded language is a part of a toolkit to get these emotions up. But if you take that story about Chippy defending his spending and strip it back to Hipkins buys house, it's way less emotive than it was presented. And finally, try and find the missing link. Bias framing often won't lie outright, but it omits context. If you can identify that missing context, it'll help you realize when a story is incomplete by design. So, by approaching all media with the 3 steps of filtering your story, how did it make you feel? If you remove loaded words, are the core facts still a big deal? And who else is reporting this and what did they think was important to tell their audience? You can be ready for the next big media story and the way it's framed. Whether it's, some spin trying to justify Nationals spreading disinformation online, to finding a way to make a Trump-loving MP who told people a short rope would fix Jacinda on Twitter seem like the sort of MP that we'd miss from Parliament. Well, another story that tries to humanise the Prime Minister by telling us that we just really need to get to know him. Hello there, Kia ora podcast listeners. This one was really difficult for me to get right, because even though I scripted all myself, I kept tripping up on the script. I think I was trying to make it far too wordy, and to be honest, it does feel like it's really wordy when you put it all together. It's just... it's a complicated, dense topic in a way because it's all about media theory and there's a whole bunch of academic stuff to it, and I'm sorry, I know that's not everybody's thing, but I did think it was a really important thing to talk about because framing is a really important thing for us to be aware of, particularly going into an election and the way that media works and which media has influence. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm working on a couple of little things like Campaign Kōrero. I want to very specifically frame that in a certain way. Same with the news. This week's The News is framed in a really specific way. And this week we're going to start rolling out a print edition of Campaign Kōrero that's going to go out through my Substack. So if you don't already get that, feel free to sign up for it. The link should be somewhere in the description in the link tree. But there were a few things that I really wanted to get right on this one. I wanted to showcase the difference between how News Talk in particular highlights a union, like an actual union, versus a taxpayer's quote-unquote union, because one is very much set up as a union structure. The other is actually a corporate NGO that doesn't have to report its profits, but that its membership, in its own terms, were just people who'd signed up for things that they'd put out there. And they don't always tell you specifically what it is that they're putting out there under their own name. They've had a whole bunch of shadowy things go on that they've tried to get people behind, like their tobacco lobby thing where they were pretending to be a whole bunch of dairy owners, for example. So, yeah, they claim that that's their membership. It's just weird. But, of course, News Talk and Herald will do what they can to justify that and legitimise that, whereas a proper union is something that the right tend not to be fans of. God knows why. So, yeah, I wanted to get that in there. I really, really specifically wanted to showcase how the Herald and Radio New Zealand have this bad habit of platforming David Seymour's talking points from David Seymour's perspective without any kind of pushback. And I think it is really important that people are aware of that. I also wanted to make sure people were really aware that Mark Cameron, the ACT MP who is leaving, who announced that he was departing on Monday, people are aware of the fact that he's not a nice person. All right, he's not a nice person, and he has had some awful, terrible, tragic things happen to him, but he is still not a nice person. And I think media framing can be really wary of that sometimes and give somebody a pleasant framing when they're not a good person because of the terrible, tragic things that happen. And trust me, I'm not an editor. I don't know the right way to go about doing that, but that's my personal observation on that particular topic. So there was a few things I wanted to get through. It's why it's quite a long one, but I got there in the end. It's just been a very long weekend. I don't know if you guys have had a chance yet to check it out, but there's a new electoral tracker on election2026.co.nz that we've been working on for a few weeks. We finally went live with it, and then, yeah, that's probably the other thing that's got me flummoxed, to be honest. We went live with it on Sunday. Really happy with it going live. And then I had a couple of messages from candidates going, can you put in fun facts about us? You don't have a fun fact about us, which I will work on. It's not my highest priority, but I will get there. The other thing that threw me was Labour released its party list on the Monday, which, again, not a problem. That's what we expect from political parties. I was hoping that the announcement this week was going to be policy, but party list makes sense as well, and it's an interesting party list. But that then meant going through and redoing some of the database work that we'd already coded so that we could encode where people were ranked on the list. So we got that done finally Monday morning, and then there was Mark Cameron being announced that he's not running again, so I had to take his details out. So yeah, it's just been fiddly day full of fiddly things, and now I'm doing a fiddly podcast with fiddly facts about framing. There is a Masters of the Universe reference in there that is not paid content. That's just me being a dick. Other than that, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to go now. My throat is starting to wear out a little bit. So yeah, enjoy. Hope you learned something from it. Feel free to go and check out that Substack thing that's linked in the bio, because it will be coming out probably tomorrow night, actually. Tuesday night, we'll do this is what you've missed this week, text edition. All right, I will catch you guys later. Have fun, live long, prosper, be one with the Force. You know the drill by now. See you around. Oh, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That too.